Hello everyone, and thank you for coming back to my channel. This one is Fruit of Passion number 8, and in Fruit of Passion number 8, I was going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the early life of Israel, and I'm going to modify that a little bit now because of the attack that Israel sustained recently. So what I'm going to do is expand on the facts that I feel are true, that we should have learned from history, and history points out to us how we should have acted. And after I do that and basically talk about history and the past that we've had and where that should lead us to the future, after that, I will then go ahead and give my opinion about what should be done now that Israel has been attacked again. So first of all, we're going to talk about history. And as most of you that have watched my channel knows, I started back with the Philistines. Now the Philistines go back, what I think is just a little more than 10,000 years before Christ. So I'm going to now elaborate on things I said, be a little more specific about the things that I think and what I think our thinking should be, not only my thinking, but every thinking in the world. Now, I have already elaborated on the fact that educated, mature, creative Homo sapien would never, ever kill another Homo sapien. Now, that being said, I'm going to talk about that history a little bit, apply to the history some of the facts that we know actually happened. Now, as I have said before, I don't get down to real close specifics. I usually broad brush most things. By broad brushing it means it's not that it's any less true, it's just that, not being an academic person, I can't spell out the details that other people have researched, studied their whole life, and can come up with. But looking at the big picture, I have a big picture about how everything fits together. If it doesn't fit together, I modify it until I understand it is more correct than wrong. Now, as I said before, Homo sapiens were not here 50,000 years before Christ. 50,000 years before Christ, we did not exist. Then Homo sapiens appeared. Now, most people think it was evolved. Well, by the time 35,000 years before Christ came around, there was no other humanoids except Homo sapiens. And as I explained before, when we came here, we could mate with some of the animals that were here. When we mated with those animals, there were enough of us that eventually left very little of the animal DNA in us. Each and every Homo sapien on the face of the planet probably has at the most up to 10% DNA from an animal. Now, the reason I mention that again is I'm going to go from 0 to 100. And by broad brushing it, I'm going to break it up in 4 sections. The first section is 0 to 25. The second section is 25 to 50. The third section is 50 to 75. And the fourth section is 75 to 100. Now, 100 is what God created us to do, which was to be a creator. And do we know that slightly after 10,000 BC, a group of gentlemen got together that eventually included, and we don't know at what point, the Amazon women. And when they got together, they had a society that was 10,000 years before Christ, puts them 12,000 years ago. They had a society that was 75 to 100% range. Now, the reason they had that range is the women were absolutely equal in the society, and there was no dictator. Everyone was just as equal as every one other citizen in the community. So, being a totally equal functioning society, and women included, being absolutely equal, put them in the 75 plus section of my thinking. They were doing exactly what God created us to be creators. Now, all we have to do is look at what God wanted us to do and explore that. Being creators, we also had a choice. By having a choice, you can choose to be a creator or you can choose not to. If you choose not to be a creator, let's go all the way to the bottom of the line of what a not creator would be. And I think everyone would agree that would be a destroyer. So Homo sapiens can be creators, destroyers, or anything in between. The reason I'm putting these numbers to it is so we can identify where the different groups are placed so we can understand why other people in this scale have to supply whatever is required of them. Now, the 0 to 25 group would be people that intentionally murder another Homo sapien and that they love to have a dictatorship. And each and every one of them, if they could, would be the head dictator. So they are not a free society. They're letting the horsepower engine run amok, and the horsepower engine is doing what it was created to do. God gave males a horsepower engine so that Homo sapiens will figure out anything that comes against them and overcome it. That was the skill that made us like God, made us creators. And so that was the way that we were identified and put together to be as God. Now, that doesn't make us God. That just gives us the ability to do what we would refer to as right from wrong. Right now would be at the top of the scale, which is to be a creator. At the bottom of the scale would be a destroyer. No one should be a destroyer. When you go down to the 90%, now you've dropped and you're only 90% a creator. You are now a 10% destroyer. Now, when you get down to 20, 30, 40, at 50%, you are just as much a destroyer in your thinking as you are a creator. So it is my opinion that for one human being to kill another human being, you have to be in the 50 to 75%, and that has to be only in a situation that you are protecting you and your society. In other words, someone else is coming to destroy you, and you cannot cage them, and you only have two choices. They're animals, they need to be caged or killed. There are no exceptions. Beyond that, when you get below the 50%, you have people that are more destroyers than they are creators. Therefore, they don't really care all about creation. They want excuses to destroy. And they're having a horsepower engine. They have all of the thought process they need to create fantasy that tells them they have a right to do it. Now, being a Christian that I am, I don't want to criticize the Muslims. They're growing by number, but they have a lot of children. They have a lot of people that they can convert, and a lot of people are hearing their preaching early on. But one of the things I like is there is competition. There's a difference between the Sunni and the Shia. And what my prediction is, the first group, whether it's Sunni or Shia, and I know that one group has a lot more followers than the other, but even if the minority can come out and say, we found where Muhammad has said one human being can only kill another human being if they're defending themselves. Now, I do know that Muhammad was big on people defending themselves, and I have no problem with that. If some idiot is trying to kill another Homo sapien and you can't put him in a cage where he belongs, then and he gets killed, then that's what he deserved. Because when he killed someone, he's begging for someone to kill him. So all of them that have actually done that kind of activity are getting exactly what they deserve. So we need to get all of the Muslims that can say we only kill Homo sapiens when they try to take over us. Now, since Israel was given the land by England, they own the land. I've already thought that any leader of a nation that goes out offensively and kills another person in another country, and we're talking about Putin here, he needs to be in a cage. There is no exception. Putin has already transgressed his ability to run a country. He needs to be replaced. Now, I'm not the one saying that. George Orwell did. George Orwell said about Putin, he is not a public servant. Every one of you Russians that believe that Putin is a servant of the people have their head in a place where they can't see daylight. They're so mistaken and they're so caught up in the fraud that they've been taught that they can't even see the truth. As George Orwell said, when a public servant has had more than 2 terms in office or 50% of his life, quote, serving a nation, he is not a servant any longer. He is a pig eating at the public trough. And that's where Putin has taken himself. He's done that on his own initiative, and he deserves the criticism that he's earned. He doesn't belong there. He needs to get out of town and leave the job over to someone else. And the only reason he wants to be there is he has robbed the Russian people so that he considers he has more money than any other human being in Europe. And he wants to steal from other people so he can feel important. Well, Putin, I have sad news for you. The only way that you will ever, ever, ever feel important is to see the light and to believe in God. Once you give your life over to God, you then can see the light. I don't care if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, or if you're an Israeli. You have to trust in God. You have to start doing what God wants and live a life that pleases God, and you will then have the satisfaction you've been looking for your entire life. Now, the only reason I can tell you that is I was blessed by being in a church when I was 9 years old. My parents put me there. It wasn't my choice. It was my parents taking care of the children. And by doing what they needed to do, I let the Lord guide me. I became a Christian. I finally got on board and listened to what he wanted me to do. And what he wants me to do now is to get us back to where we were 3,550 years ago. He wants every nation on the face of the planet to be equal and independent. We don't need kings. We don't need leaders. We need public administrators. And they are only temporary for short periods of time because no human being, and that includes King Solomon. And the reason I know that is once King Solomon died, his son was given the opportunity to lighten the load that had been put on the 12 tribes of Israel. And they said, lighten the load on us, and we will serve you forever. Now, they're not saying we don't want a king anymore. They're just saying lighten the load from what your dad did. And unfortunately, like horsepower engines and professional politicians, there's only one thing they need, and that is more. You take any of them, every professional politician in the United States of America has run America into the ground. And the way they did that is all through fraud. They have not balanced the budget. And they say, oh, the people told us we could do it. No, you putting a debt on the children and grandchildren. They never voted for you to do anything. You didn't have the right to do it. If you can't balance the budget, you're not allowed to be paid. You didn't do your job. So if the money doesn't get balanced, the first people that don't get paid are all of the legislators. And if the president has a right to veto, blue line veto, then he's the second one to lose his income. They have to serve without pay if they can't do the job. And that's to run a country, pay the bills that need to be paid, and have a government that is the government equal to what the Philistines had. Now, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. All we have to do is follow the line of the Philistines from Tempe all the way to South America. And one thing was always consistent. If the Philistines are left alone, they are traders. They manufacture and they trade. They don't try to conquer or subjugate anyone, including women. Is to have land in the middle of Iran and Iraq. Now, why do I say that? Because they're all Muslim people. And in Iraq, they are basically what we call Sunnis. And in Iran, they're Shiites. The Shiites and the Sunnis don't get along. But if you put this Palestine nation on the border between both of those, and as far as Iraq is concerned, they caused a war on the United States of America, and the United States of America beat them. United States of America, for one of the first times in history, won the war and did not hold on to the land. They gave it back to the people that were a little more reasonable. But we can acquire the land from Iraq and Iran. We can pay them a little bit for it. I looked on the map, and most of the land is bare land, deserted. We need to give the Palestinians a strip of land that will separate those two countries. Now, both of those countries are more secure because now they will have a community between them that will not be Sunni and will not be Shiite. They will be a mixture of Muslims. Muslims don't all think alike. They don't all have the same ideas. All we want the Muslims to do is not have one Homo sapien killing another one. We don't need anyone killing, and then we will not have anyone having to defend. If no one is killing, then no one needs to fight and destroy. We can eliminate all destruction, and after we then make a few other adjustments, we can go forward and move every nation on the face of the world up above the 50% line. We don't need to have any other destroyers in the world at all. We want everyone to be more of a creator than a destroyer. We want to get rid of all destroyers. Now, as I said before, Israel is put between a rock and a hard place. I did hear some Americans make some comments about Israel, and if you use their logic and their idea of what right and wrong is, it is exactly the same as saying if some pervert finds a beautiful woman that he likes, so he kidnaps her, rapes her, sodomizes her, and murders her, she's at fault for the attack. Now, as I said, everyone can think what they want. I know that he hasn't thought through his thinking, because his thinking alone by saying, oh, will Israel let themselves be caught off guard because they didn't figure out that these Muslims could do what they're doing and therefore they're at fault. That's like saying the United States of America is at fault for the destruction of the world towers because we didn't figure out what Osama bin Laden was going to do, and therefore it's our fault. And that's the same as the girl being raped. No, it's none of her faults. But Israel does have a responsibility, and their responsibility is to go find everyone that basically set out to murder their citizens. They have to cage or kill 100% of them. Now, are some of these citizens going to get caught in the crossfire? Of course they are. And the more they go out and act like they're supporting the murderers, the more in the crossfire they're going to get caught. Because they're totally wrong. You can't back up people that are destroyers. We are creators. When you see someone around you that's a destroyer, try to educate him. Help him to move beyond that. No Homo sapien needs to be a destroyer. God created us as creators. God created the heavens and the earth, and when he created Homo sapiens, he did the same thing. One of the things to guarantee we get there is the horsepower engine, but the horsepower engine has choices, and one of the choices is to use the horsepower engine to be a destroyer. He is now no different than any other animal that is a wild animal, needs to be caged or killed. No exceptions. And that being now, I think the 20 minutes is up. I'm going to say this is the end of Fruit of Passion number 8. And I hope that if you like my video, you'll ask the people to subscribe. I'm still looking to pick up a little traction, and I would appreciate that. And for now, I'm going to say goodbye. This is the end of Fruit of Passion number 8.